Okay, June 14th, Sunday. 3-day weekend of nothing but this. And it still is not running. What do you know? The reason for that is because, in my haste, I threw away all of the um, little rubber grommets that hold the valve cover down, because I figured they came as part of the new valve cover gasket kit, but I was so wrong. But this is just sort of hanging out here because I don't want any dust to get into the motor. But otherwise, the rest of the intake manifold, air filter box, everything is all ready to go. It was a little bit difficult figuring out where all the connectors go. Unfortunately, they don't publish this information online, so I had to fill in my own diagram, trying to figure out what goes where. And lots of the connectors, unfortunately, on this are the same, because the wiring harness on this car is probably similar to what you found in like 1980 on a BMW. But nonetheless, we've got it done, and because I'm stalled for putting the transmission on, because this shift selector shaft is leaking. You can see the oil coming out of it there. I'm waiting on that part. I can't put the transmission back on, and the starter bolts to the transmission, so I can't start the car until that's together. So I decided to take a swing at the front shocks. Literal swing. And what's nice about this car is that it's rear-wheel drive, so you can just loosen everything up and sort of lever the shock absorber out. But unfortunately, you have to remove these tie rods, which involve lots of hammering, heating, and stripping ball joint removal tools from Harbor Freight, swearing. Unfortunately, it didn't come out so cleanly on the driver's side. What happened was, because it's an aluminum knuckle, they used this steel sleeve, and there's a washer here that holds the steel sleeve into place inside the aluminum knuckle right there. And I had to, it's so stuck here, the tapered ball joint is so stuck, I had to force this sleeve out, which means I have to load this whole thing up into the press in order to get this sleeve, which is not sold separately, off so I can put it back into the knuckle. Which means, of course, I need new tie rods, and you can't just change one of those. And while I was in there, on the While You're In There car, I noticed that a couple of these ball joint boots for the control arms were also torn. So, of course, I'm just going to do the entire front end, just to show how quickly things can snowball on this car. So that means this, what they call thrust arm, forward-facing control arm, is getting changed. That's getting changed. Both sides. Back here, I started on the brakes. I just sort of wanted to tear everything down today, because that's, quite frankly, my least favorite part of hammering and stripping things and breaker bars. But that's a new brake hose. I got new pads and rotors for the back. This will be all wire-wheeled and clean. I've got new pad sensors. It looks pretty much the same on the other side. Not a lot of drama with the brakes, fortunately. I've got to adjust these brake shoes, which are adjusted with this spur. I don't know if you can see it very well. There's a turning thing that opens and closes these brake shoes, which rub up against the inside of the rotor. The hat of the rotor, which is nice because lots of cars, especially cheaper cars, just have a thing that when you pull the handbrake, it's just a cable that squeezes the brake caliper together. But what ends up happening is that mechanism fails, and then they stick, and the calipers need to be replaced. So, of course, the calipers are original on this. which is kind of nice because those are pretty expensive. But then again, everything else has been pretty expensive on this thing. So that's about it. Hopefully, as I said last week for this week, now this week for next week, and I know I said that a couple of weeks ago, hopefully this thing will run by Sunday or Saturday. And I can bring it to the dealership for an alignment. Last time I brought this thing to a BMW dealership, they said they hadn't seen one in 15 years, so that was a few years ago. All right, well, hopefully the next update will be a running car if it starts.